There's a detail that keeps showing up in biographies about Pastor Enoch Adejare Adeboye. It's not dramatic, it's not flashy, and it doesn't sound like the beginning of a global story. The detail is this: he was quiet. Not quiet in the poetic sense. Quiet as in unnoticed. Soft-spoken, studious. More comfortable with numbers than microphones. Before the stadiums. Before the global headquarters. Before the monthly gatherings that pull in crowds large enough to look like cities. There was a man who preferred equations. And that alone raises the question. Because when you look at the world today, when you zoom out far enough, Pastor Adeboye is not just a religious leader. He is an institution. Millions listen when he speaks. Governments acknowledge his influence. Entire cities reorganize traffic because of events tied to his ministry. And this is where the story gets interesting. Because stories like this usually begin with charisma, or rebellion, or a moment of explosive revelation. But this one doesn't. It begins with discipline and structure, and a system that most people don't notice until it's already working. So the question that drives this entire documentary is simple and deceptively difficult. How does a quiet mathematics professor become one of the most influential spiritual leaders on earth? That's what we're going to unpack, not as believers, not as critics, but as observers of how faith, structure, and leadership intersect. And everything you're about to hear comes from biographies, public sermons, historical accounts, and long-form interviews that already exist, laid side by side until pattern begins to appear. Before the altar, there was a classroom. Enoch Adejare Adeboye was born in 1942 in a small village in Osun State, Nigeria. The environment he grew up in was not one of privilege. It was modest, rural, structured by necessity. And here's something important. Nothing about his early life suggests inevitability. No prophecy of global reach. No early signs of leadership ambition. No mythic origin story. What does show up consistently is discipline. Education mattered. He excelled academically, not socially, not theatrically, academically. By the time he entered the University of Lagos, mathematics wasn't just a subject. It was a language, a way of ordering chaos. And if you listen closely to Pastor Adeboye's later sermons, this matters more than people realize. Because mathematics teaches something very specific, that systems behave predictably when principles are followed. And that idea, that order produces outcome, becomes a quiet undercurrent in everything that follows. Eventually, he earns a PhD in applied mathematics. Let that sit for a second. A PhD, not theology, not philosophy, applied mathematics, which means his training wasn't abstract belief. It was problem solving, inputs, processes, outputs. And at this stage in the story, there's no pulpit in sight, just a lecturer, teaching students, marking scripts, living a contained academic life. So when people later talk about destiny, it's worth remembering, this was not a man chasing ministry. Faith doesn't enter the story with thunder. It enters the way it enters most lives, gradually. In the early 1970s, Adeboye encounters Christianity more deeply and eventually becomes a born-again Christian. Later, he joins the Redeemed Christian Church of God, a small, tightly structured church at the time. And here's where the hairstyle lens matters, because it would be easy to frame this as a purely spiritual turning point. But if you step back, something else is happening. He enters a system. RCCG, under its founder Josiah Olufemi Akindayome, was not flashy. It emphasized discipline, hierarchy, and obedience. There were rules, processes, expectations. This is important because for someone trained in mathematics, this kind of environment doesn't feel restrictive. It feels logical. Adeboye doesn't immediately become a preacher. He becomes a translator. Akindayome preached primarily in Yoruba. Adeboye translated sermons into English. That role, translator, is revealing. It requires listening, processing, precision, not performance. And over time, trust forms. In 1980, Akindayome dies. But before his death, something unusual happens. According to church records and biographies, Akindayome claims to have received divine instruction naming Adeboye as his successor. This is a critical moment, not because of the spiritual claim, but because of the organizational implication. RCCG was still relatively small, local, contained. Adeboye becomes general overseer in 1981. And here's the thing most people miss. He doesn't explode onto the scene. There's no instant megachurch, no global strategy announcement. Instead, there's consolidation. Rules are reinforced. Structures are clarified. Doctrine is standardized. If you listen to sermons from the early years, the tone is measured, almost restrained, which raises an uncomfortable but fascinating idea. What if growth wasn't driven by charisma, but by consistency? This is where the macro lens kicks in. Under Adeboye, RCCG adopts a philosophy that is deceptively simple. Plant churches everywhere, not big ones, small ones, neighborhood-level parishes, easily replicable, low cost. Each parish follows the same structure, same doctrine, same reporting hierarchy. This is not spontaneous revival. This is franchising, religious franchising. And again, this isn't an accusation. It's an observation. Systems scale when they are simple. And RCCG's system was extremely simple. By the 1990s, parishes are spreading rapidly across Nigeria, then across Africa, then Europe, then North America, each one feeding upward, each one reinforcing the same authority structure. Adeboye becomes less a local pastor and more a central node. What makes Adeboye's influence unusual is not how loud it is, but how stable it is. He rarely courts controversy, rarely responds aggressively to criticism, rarely inserts himself into partisan politics. And yet, when he speaks, people listen. Presidents attend church events. Business leaders seek blessings. Millions tune in monthly. And this is where the mathematics metaphor comes back. Influence doesn't always grow by shouting. Sometimes it grows by accumulation, trust, repetition, time. So by the end of this first movement, we're left with a clearer picture and a deeper mystery. A man trained in numbers steps into faith. A structured church becomes a global network. Quiet leadership scales into massive influence. But we haven't answered the hardest question yet, because growth explains reach. It doesn't explain loyalty. It doesn't explain why millions don't just attend, but believe. And that's where part 2 begins. By the time Pastor Adeboye becomes a global name, something unusual has already happened. He has influence without spectacle. No flamboyant scandals. No dramatic personality cult. No public feuds. And yet the numbers keep growing. This is the point in the story where most documentaries make a mistake. They jump straight to power. But power is the result. What we need to understand is the mechanism. Because people don't follow systems forever unless something deeper is happening. So let's slow down. Let's zoom in again. Here's a difficult truth that makes people uncomfortable. Faith alone doesn't scale. Belief is emotional. Emotion is powerful, but emotion is unstable. If you've ever watched a movement burn bright and collapse just as fast, you already know this. What scales is belief plus structure. And RCCG under Adeboye masters this pairing. Not loudly, not aggressively, quietly. The church emphasizes obedience, order, submission to authority, personal holiness, discipline. None of these are new ideas, but together they form something incredibly durable. And this is where Adeboye's leadership becomes clearer. He doesn't position himself as a celebrity. He positions himself as a spiritual reference point. The axis. Everything points upward, not outward. If you want to understand influence, don't look at speeches. Look at rituals. RCCG's monthly Holy Ghost service becomes one of the largest regular religious gatherings on earth. Not annually, monthly. People travel for hours, sometimes days. Entire highways reorganize. And here's the Harris-style question. Why? It's not just the sermons. It's the predictability. People know when it happens where it happens what it represents. Consistency builds trust. Trust builds loyalty. Loyalty builds scale. And Adeboye rarely centers himself theatrically. He teaches. He prays. He repeats themes, which creates something subtle but powerful. a sense of continuity. Adeboye's authority is not enforced through intimidation. It's reinforced through alignment. Pastors want to be aligned. Members want to be aligned. Alignment means access. Alignment means legitimacy. Alignment means covering. And the language matters. Covering, fatherhood, spiritual lineage. These are not corporate terms. They are relational metaphors. And metaphors are sticky. They turn abstract hierarchy into emotional bonds. Now let's zoom out again. Why did RCCG succeed globally where many African churches struggled? Because it didn't export Nigerian culture. It exported structure. Parishes adapt locally, but authority remains centralized. Doctrine stays consistent. Leadership pipelines stay clear. And Adeboye stays distant, not absent, distant, which paradoxically increases reverence. Listen to biographies and long-form interviews, and something stands out. Adeboye doesn't speak like a conqueror. He speaks like a steward. This matters, because leaders who frame themselves as stewards last longer than leaders who frame themselves as heroes. Heroes burn out. Stewards endure. Governments notice. But Adeboye rarely endorses candidates directly. He prays. He advises privately. He remains symbolic, which preserves neutrality and reach. This is influence without entanglement. And it's intentional. Here's where the documentary takes a quiet turn. Because scale has a cost. When a movement becomes massive, expectations harden. Every word is scrutinized. Every silence is interpreted. Every prayer is politicized. And Adeboye responds the same way he always has, by narrowing his focus. Faith, order, continuity. By now, the original question has evolved. It's no longer just, how did a mathematics professor rise to influence? It becomes, what kind of leadership sustains belief across generations without collapsing under its own weight? And that's where the final part begins. Because influence isn't proven at its peak. It's proven when time starts asking hard questions. We've seen the system. We've seen the growth. We've seen the discipline. What we haven't examined yet is legacy. What happens when a movement built on one central figure begins to think about continuity?